Hi, I'm Mark Cleghorn from the Photographer Academy, and today we're talking about do I need a photo studio to be a portrait photographer? In fact, during my career, it's probably one of the most consistent questions that I get asked in the likes of webinars or in face-to-face workshops. I would say the first thing would be is separate yourself. Am I a semi-professional, professional portrait photographer, or am I a hobbyist photographer? As far as being a hobbyist photographer is concerned, you probably know you don't really need to spend the money or the time to have a permanent setup studio, not unless you've got room in the home or a converted garage to be able to actually create that kind of working space. It's a lot easier, of course, when you've got a permanent position where you know you can walk into a space and basically your backgrounds and your lighting is already kind of set up in some way. I would say, though, if it starts to interfere with home life, that is where I'll discourage you from having a permanent setup there. Many years ago, in a one-to-one kind of business building that I was running, when I was working with a photographer, and I'd be with him during the course of a year on and off. And it didn't matter if they were working from home or from a business premises, I would actually stay in their home with them. And the reason to do that was to actually see how family life was being affected by the actual business itself, whether they were both in the business as partners or one was the photographer and one went out to work, or whatever. I wanted to see how the impact of the business was having a big effect. And a photographer, in one case I visited, pretty much he'd allowed the business to spill out from the one room that they'd agreed to be dedicated into the business environment, into 3 other rooms within the home. And this wasn't as if it was a very big house. And my first kind of thing was to control your space, minimize what you have, minimize what you use, and make sure whatever is in the room you're designated with, it is a one-room operation and things. And that's whether you're a kind of an amateur photographer or a semi-pro. So controlling the space. So if I was an amateur photographer, I would basically look more at using a space that is available to me, go on location. I think if you go in search of locations, you become an instantly more creative mind because you're looking rather than just settling in for the space and the background that you already have. So location, whether it's a beach, whether it's architecture, whether it's the back of an old building, or you're kind of using clients' homes, whatever that space is, kind of really embrace it, suck it up, really enjoy it. And then kind of, if you need to, bring out your pop-up background or whatever it would be and things. But stop trying to think that I need a lot of lighting, a lot of backgrounds to be a portrait photographer. Then if we look at things through a semi-pro kind of environment, we can separate those into 2 halves as well, because as a pro photographer, if you're throwing everything into portrait photography, it's going to be a numbers game, and you're going to need to know how many sessions per day you're trying to create. And obviously, if you're a general portrait photographer, i.e. families, kids, babies, etc., you probably need to think about a more permanent space, more than if you were a headshot photographer, where pretty much you can be portable no matter where you're going and things, really. So I would say that, do I need a studio to be a portrait photographer? If it's a money game, it's going to help you because basically you'll be able to do more clients per day with less hassle in creating the actual setups and so on. So it allows the X times Y equals Z. In other words, the amount of sessions times by the amount of sale that you can be able to do will make the business a success or not. As far as if I'm a portrait photographer, but I am, more of a headshot photographer, a business photographer, shooting for actors, singers, dancers, then absolutely not. You do not need a portrait studio. You can work, as I said, on location without any real setup costs. And what I would suggest that you tell that tale instead of apologizing that you don't have a studio space or whatever it is in the words on your website and so on. Talk about the creativity that it allows you to use on location. Talk about why you get inspired when you shoot with different people in different locations. Talk about the positives, because I promise you they are true, except in the mindset game at times, you can think that you're a sub photographer because you don't have a permanent studio space. And I promise you that that has nothing in any form of relative creative combination there. You don't need to combine those two. That is just a mindset game. So when we're looking for a business, we need to really understand who we are and what we are. And if you say, look, I'm a photographer with a bag and I travel, that's my speciality. If I'm a photographer with a permanent studio space, then that's my speciality. I would say that when you try and do both, you confuse yourself and you confuse the client, and more often than not, you're going to be a headless chicken running from one thing to another. And the last thing you want to be is a photographer with a studio space and you're then offering to go out and actually shoot on location, wherever it is, because you will basically be diluting the benefit of actually taking all that time to set up your space. So I mentioned about, as far as the studio space is concerned, it can be a room within your home, if that kind of works within your lifestyle, in other words, your family life and so on. And don't kind of worry about bringing the client to a home, as long as their journey within the home is good. So from the curb to the front door, it makes them feel like this is a professional that they're going to be kind of walking into. How they're greeted at the front door, their journey from the front door to the photography space, the option to get changed, the option to use the facilities, if they need the loo, which pretty much most clients will do. So what is the journey, the logistics, the way that they kind of work or walk through your space? Is that really good? Because if it is exceptional, and you don't have to have a massive home to kind of give a great journey, but everything just needs to be feeling professional. And the more professional it feels, the more confidence a client will have, the more they'll believe in you, the more they'll believe in the pricing that you present to them as well. No different to actually having a shop on the high street. If there's cobwebs in the window, if you haven't changed the window display in a while, or they're walking up a flight of stairs to get to a first floor studio space and you haven't cleaned the stairs, some photographers say, well, it's not my domain, so I don't need to clean them. But you do. You need to give that client a journey, a full-on kind of look. So as far as do I need that space is concerned, you can see how it kind of can be applied in different ways. Depends on the type of photographer that you are. What I would say is, if you absolutely dedicate the concept to having a studio style of photography, whether you're working on location, whether you're working in a client's home or you're working in a professional studio space, you should think about your style. You should think about the backgrounds and the lighting that you're going to take or use as a minimal to create and follow through the look and the feel to your photography. Remember, this is all about you and your photography. Don't worry too much about what other photographers think or what others think. But don't also try and be like every other photographer, because the more like them you are, the less you're going to stand out in a field amongst others. What you've really got to do is concentrate and develop a look and a feel that represents you, whether you're in a professional portrait studio environment or you're working in an office space. So to answer the question quickly, do I need a photo studio to be a portrait photographer? The simple answer is no. Think about working on location, whether it is in a client space, if you're a headshot photographer, a business photographer, lifestyle photographer, whatever you are, but think about location, but think about not just taking a studio into the space, also look at how you can use their space to kind of really develop and shoot some great images in that realm. When you're working in a client's home, make the decision right from the get-go, if I was you, whether you are going to be a portable photographer, taking equipment in, or you're using the home environment to create and shoot the still images. When you're looking at your own home studio space, as I said already, the number one thing is to think about the client journey coming in and going out. And does it really represent you? You know, at some stage, many of us will convert a garage space into our first studio or put an attic room in or whatever it would be. Whenever we're doing these things, think, as I said, about the journey as well, the journey to the garage, the journey to the attic. They might not always be the best thing if you're selling yourself in the professional environment, but as a hobbyist photographer and a semi-pro photographer, it's an amazing place to have your own space that you know that you can be as creative as you want, make as much mess as you want, and have the time of your life creating those images and things, really. If you're going to rent a studio space, you're going to decide on whether, if you're a rental studio, will usually have their light in there and so on. And you'll usually find a location that is using professional lighting equipment. And if you're not familiar with that equipment, you need to get familiar with that equipment straight away. As an Elinchrom kind of user of lighting, if I went to a studio space and I had to use something else, it wouldn't take me too long to understand exactly how it works, but it might not have all the functionality and all the benefits that the likes of Elinchrom brings to me. Whereas when you walk into a studio space and they don't supply the light in, then really what you're renting is space. And I would say if you're going to go to a rental studio and they don't have any light in situ as such, or including in the setup for the day, you may as well actually rent a kind of a room in a hotel room, probably kind of less space as far as photographic wise is concerned, but it'll be warmer, it'll be quicker to set up, there'll be better client experiences with coffees and everything else with it around, the loos are going to be good and so on with it. So it doesn't have to be a rental photographic studio space, it could be renting space or a church hall or a school hall or whatever it would be. So hopefully I've kind of ticked the boxes for you. If you're a professional portrait photographer trying to do a lot more clients in a day, then you'll need space. If you're a professional portrait photographer and you're working in client's location and you're only doing, say, one session in the morning, one session in the afternoon, you can be a photographer with a bag and you can travel. If you're a hobbyist photographer, think more about converting a space in home, but don't be afraid, and I'll encourage you to shoot on location. Woodlands, beaches, architecture, you name it, just get out there and have a bit of fun. And if it's just kind of you thinking that you want to develop you as a photographer, then just set up a quick portable home studio to kind of use the kind of the equipment that you have. And remember, I have a saying that says natural light before a reflector. Reflector before flash, and flash is a last resort. What flash does is, at this time of year, and it's January 2023, and it's dark outside in UK, it means that I've basically got to have supplementary lighting in some way, or I've got a restricted time of day that I can shoot. So always use the kit that you have or the kit that you need to get the quality of the photography.